There's a lot I could have put in this talk that I could not for the time given. So believe me, this is a talk that could go for days. Today, I want to focus on the ethical and psychological tensions between certainty and doubt, because often I feel like we oscillate between the two, one moment asserting supreme confidence in our beliefs and the next collapsing into skeptical paralysis. Neither extreme is very useful, and both can be dangerous. I'll set this into a metaphor drawn from Aristotle. Living a good life often requires that we navigate between the extremes of certainty and doubt. Like ancient ship captains, we need to stay within sight of the shore so we don't drift too far out and become lost at sea. Either extreme puts us in danger. But while we can recover from being lost at sea, shipwreck is catastrophic. One extreme is more dangerous. As we consider the extremes of unquestioning certainty and crippling doubt, which is the greater danger? Recently, I've been thinking a lot about how doubt is dangerous. I mean, it's dangerous to doubt that Biden won the election, or that humans contribute to climate change, or that masks help protect us against COVID. But certainty is also dangerous, such as when people who are so certain about those doubts, like those who are certain about doubting climate change, saying it's a hoax, that's a real danger. That puts the human race in danger of survival. But what about us rational humanists? Is our own certainty sometimes a problem? Felix Adler, the founder of ethical culture, saw danger in both extremes. He knew well the danger of religious fanaticism and the suffering that it causes. Crusades, inquisitions, and jihads have slaughtered men, women, and children. Some true believers seem eager to kill each other to prove a point. It's why Adler founded a movement based not on competing metaphysics, but on ethical cooperation. It's why he emphasized deed before creed. But Adler also worried that doubt would become relativism, and relativism would become nihilism, and that doubt would get out of control and undermine the collective construction of knowledge. During his life, more and more anthropologists revealed the beautiful diversity and complexity of global beliefs and cultures, and more people understood the pluralism of truth, more accepted the advice of, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Today, I'm going to explore this tension between certainty and doubt. On the one hand, it feels good to feel certain. We revel in righteous proclamations, don't we? On the other hand, blind faith and unquestioning allegiance can fuel fanaticism. So which is the most dangerous extreme? How do we manage this tension? Within humanism, ensconced in evidence and rationality, how do we manage doubt? Let's look back in history a bit at the roots of free thought and philosophy. Most citizens of ancient Greece held a static perspective on reality. A pantheon of gods and traditions gave priests and politicians control of wealth and worldviews. The philosopher Protagoras began causing trouble when he said that man is the measure of all things. In ancient Greece, this expression was subversively skeptical. It implied that gods were not the measure of all things. Knowledge was something that each person could construct by observing the world and thinking logically. All things were measured by humans. Well, this didn't sit well with philosophers who claimed a logos, a rational order that pervades the universe. These philosophers preferred the orthodoxy, stability, and hierarchy that seemed to link Athens' power and prosperity with their worldview. In the Hellenic world, Athens were certain they were number one. When Athenian hegemony began to be challenged like rivals from Sparta and Carthage, these cultural assumptions were called into doubt by Socrates. Socrates described Athens as a large, lazy, thoroughbred horse which ceased exercising. This apathetic horse needed a gadfly to sting it and rouse it back into productive activity. That gadfly was Socrates, and the sting he applied was doubt. The philosopher Meno criticized Socrates for sowing doubt and paralyzing confusion. Meno said to Socrates, "You seem to me to be just like the stingray who numbs anyone who approaches and touches it." Socrates said that revealing the folly of false beliefs would get folks to think better. The horse of Athens would be shocked back into robust health. Unfortunately, for threatening the status quo, free-thinking Socrates was condemned to death. Well, about 2 centuries later, Descartes also used doubt to attack ignorance. He questioned beliefs passed down by culture and church. To clear away these mistakes, Descartes employed methodic doubt. He questioned everything that was not absolutely, clearly, and distinctly true. While he claimed to do so to make room for faith in God, the church viewed him with suspicion. A century later, David Hume used skepticism more directly to attack religion. As an Enlightenment philosopher, he condemned superstition and praised empirically verified knowledge. Hume's religious skepticism burst forth in atheistic glory in his late and posthumous publications. He condemned claims of unseen gods and unproven miracles. Across the Channel in France, Denis Diderot, after a Jesuit education, he rejected religious authority and compiled the most up-to-date compilation of knowledge in the Western world. Vilified by monarchists and clergymen for this effort, he was ostracized and imprisoned. These philosophical skeptics and martyrs inspired the great freethinker Robert G. Ingersoll. Known as the great agnostic, Ingersoll praised the apostles of doubt and condemned those, quote, engaged in poisoning the minds of the young, prejudicing children against science, teaching the astronomy and geology of the Bible, and inducing all to desert the sublime standard of reason. Ingersoll was embraced by many Americans who criticized superstition and embraced modernity. He rallied his followers by explaining, "We are not endeavoring to change the future, but to free the present. We are not forging fetters for our children, but we are breaking those our fathers made for us. We are the advocates of inquiry, of investigation, of thought. This of itself is an admission that we are not perfectly satisfied with our conclusions. Philosophy has not the egotism of faith." What erases the egotism of faith? What removes the false foundations of knowledge? Doubt. Ingersoll proclaimed, "Progress is born of doubt and inquiry. The church never doubts, never inquires. To doubt is heresy. To inquire is to admit that you do not know. The church does neither." End quote. Freethought liberated Ingersoll and millions of others from dogma. He celebrated his freedom in this famous passage that I'll read most of because it's so wonderful. "When I became convinced that the universe is natural, that all ghosts and gods and myths there entered into my brain, into my soul, into every drop of my blood, the sense, the feeling, the joy of freedom. That the ghosts and gods are myths. The walls of my prison crumbled and fell. The dungeon was flooded with light, and all the bolts and bars and manacles became dust. I was no longer a servant or a serf or a slave. There was for me no master in all the world, not even infinite space. I was free. Free to think, to express my thoughts, free to live my own ideals, free to live for myself and those I loved, free to use all my faculties, all my senses, free to spread imagination's wings, free to investigate, to guess, and to dream and hope, free to judge and determine for myself, free to reject all ignorant and cruel creeds, all the inspired books that savages have produced, all the barbarous legends of the past, free from popes and priests, from the sanctified mistakes of holy lies, free from the winged monsters of the night, free from devils, ghosts, and gods. For the first time I was free, There were no prohibited places in all the realm of thought, no air, no space where fancy could not spread her painted wings, no claims for my limbs, no lashes for my back, no fires for my flesh, no following another's steps, no need to bow or cringe or crawl or utter lying words. I was free. I stood erect and fearlessly, joyously faced all worlds. Then my heart was filled with gratitude, with thankfulness, and went out in love to all the heroes, the thinkers who gave their lives for liberty of hand and brain. And he concluded, I vowed to grasp the torch that they, Socrates, Hume, Diderot, skeptics, rational scientists, I vowed to grasp the torch that they have held and hold it high that light may conquer darkness still. All right, I want to carry the torch of skepticism in science, but the metaphor of torches marching through streets gave me pause. As much as I love Ingersoll's heartfelt proclamation, I worry a bit. Are freethinkers and humanists sometimes guilty of unfounded certainty? How about the fervent atheist? Are they ever too sure? William James put it this way in talking about the fervent atheist. He said, he believes in no God and worships him. Well, with that, let's explore the psychological craving for certainty. First of all, uncertainty can be exhausting, right? I mean, in a dangerous world, uncertainty magnifies potential threats. I don't know. I don't know what the threats are. When uncertain, we have to be more on alert and we can become more anxious. Even when there's nothing we can do to assure safety, uncertainty causes anxiety. Like when we're waiting for the result of a biopsy, right? Neuroscientist David Rock writes, your brain craves certainty and avoids uncertainty like it's pain. He explains a sense of uncertainty about the future generates a strong threat or alert response in your limbic system. In contrast, certainty soothes and satisfies. Rock explains, for humans, the desire for certainty is inborn. It's part of the wiring of the brain. So is this why the loss of religious faith can feel so crushing? Humans can feel depressed and overwhelmed when a previous all-encompassing faith in God disappears. As Susan Jacoby noted in her book Freethinkers, Abraham Lincoln's depressive episodes may have been linked to his religious skepticism. During the anguish of the war, Lincoln didn't hear the voice of God. He had no divine map to rely on. And burdened by doubts, only his strength of character and the support of his friends and advisors and family guided him through bloodshed and tears. It might have been easier on Lincoln had he believed in God. I mean, doesn't faith in the supernatural relieve us of the burdens of power? It relieved President McKinley, for example, when confronting the dilemma of whether to annex the Philippines. McKinley told others that, quote, I went down on my knees and prayed to Almighty God for light and guidance more than one night. Then when it, quote, came to him that we should annex the islands, he said, I went to bed and went to sleep and slept soundly. The certainty of divine guidance comforted him. And that seductive quality of religious certainty leads many people to bow down before gurus and messiahs, often with disastrous results. This is what happened in 1978 to followers of Jim Jones, the cult leader who murdered over 900 people after they followed him to Guyana. Well before this horror, Jones's confidence and charisma made him a political power in the Bay Area. And it helped him convince hundreds to drink poison in preparation for the end times. That, according to author Mark Manson, demonstrates the power of super beliefs. Interesting term. Manson says that super beliefs are so big and abstract that they encompass all other beliefs and experiences that could potentially contradict them. Super beliefs cannot be proven or disproven. We tend to cling to them as though our lives depended on it. Super beliefs avoid a most fundamental characteristic of science, the reliance on verifiability and falsifiability. Manson writes that super beliefs can be benevolent or intolerant. He offers these examples. Everything happens for a reason. Something is only true if there's evidence to support it. God has a plan for everyone. Or, for you fans of The Matrix, we all live in a computer-generated virtual reality and are enslaved by machines. You can't disprove that. They're not falsifiable. True believers also will often harden their faith if you challenge these super beliefs. And super beliefs can motivate people to do evil. Mason explains that people who do horrible things do them because they're so sure in their own moral superiority. They're so confident that they are right and others are wrong that they feel justified in imposing their own beliefs on others through force. Whether we're talking about Hitler, Mayo, napalming half of the South China Sea, or honoring killing a woman in Pakistan for showing her ankles in public, people who do awful shit do it because they are certain of their own moral righteousness, and that moral righteousness is usually the product of some super belief which cannot be verified or concretely challenged. End quote. While doubt may sometimes delay ethical action, rarely does it cause murder and mayhem. Let me now switch over, explore the virtues of doubt more. I mean, one of the most obvious virtues of doubt is that it reminds us to look before we leap. It can inhibit rash behavior. Despite our relatively advanced intellects, we can be spectacularly stupid. Study after study conclude that people know a lot less than they think they do. And often, the more certain we are, the less correct we are. Karen Schultz, author of Being Wrong, Adventures in the Margin of Error, writes, a whole lot of us go through life assuming that we are basically right, basically all the time, about basically everything. She adds, our steady state seems to be one of unconsciously assuming that we are very close to omniscient. Unfortunately, that's simply false. We know that. William Cunningham, who's a professor at University of Toronto, says that even when it comes to our own memories, we're less reliable than we believe. And when it comes to knowledge about technology or the natural world, our wisdom gets even more questionable. I mean, he says, ask somebody to draw a bicycle or explain a crossbow or describe a hurricane, and you'll get a lot of nonsense. We exaggerate differences, omit much, and make up stuff. Our overconfidence is caused by what is called the illusion of explanatory depth. Northwestern University's Adam White explains the illusion of explanatory depth this way. He says that if 100 random people describe how a refrigerator works, most would begin explaining it with confidence, but when challenged, they're often reduced to stammering and silence, and they don't get it right. We simply are too often gripped by the powerful but inaccurate feeling of knowing. Researchers believe that increasing access to information has made this whole situation worse. We read more headlines, but fewer articles. Raise your hand if you do that. Tweets shape our political opinions. Memes and sound bites dominate our ethical perspectives. We know more about superficial appearances, but less about the reality behind the appearances. White adds, in any given field, the most ignorant are often the most overconfident in their understanding. To counter messianic cult leaders or differential bureaucracies or our own habit to think that we're always right, doubt is very valuable. Although it can cause discomfort, It can serve us well. It can warn us of potential negative outcomes, encourage us to measure twice, cut once. Mark Manson sums it up by saying, doubt is healthy. Doubt is a virtue. Just like lifting heavy weights breaks down bone and muscle to make them stronger, the same is true of doubt and one's ideas and beliefs. There is no brilliant idea without doubt, as doubt and criticism and failure is what slowly chisels an okay idea into the brilliant result the world ends up seeing. My daughter Maya, a fifth grade science teacher, agreed. She says that mistakes are the heart of teaching. She doesn't want to ask questions that only solicit correct answers. When a student makes an error, that's where learning begins. Failing is an opportunity to learn. That's central to a new initiative at Smith College called Failing Well. Many students, racked with anxiety should they fail, forget that the point of education is to learn from your mistakes. Smith administrators hope to destigmatize failure and boost resilience. Rachel Simmons, who works at Smith's Center for Work and Life, explains, what we're trying to teach is that failure is not a bug of learning, it's the feature. Marcy Regalado told me that at Stanford Engineering School, Professor David Beach encourages students to embrace failure as necessary for growth. Beach explained that, quote, most Stanford students have always excelled academically. The trickiest thing for us is to convince them that they have to do some bad stuff before they can do some good stuff. Marcy recalls Professor Beach encouraging students to stand up in front of class and their peers and proudly proclaim, I failed. Often applause and affirmation follow. It's become almost a brand of Stanford engineering. Too often, fear of making a mistake can shut off what's most important about design engineering: creativity, ingenuity, originality. It's important to take risks and think outside the box. Now, personally, I try to think outside the box, but I admit that too often I cling to past beliefs and statements and patterns, whether it's because I'm trying to protect my ego, my reputation, or power. I don't always follow my intellectual commitment to doubt. More times than I would like to admit it, I don't want to admit I was wrong. When we turn to politics, that seems like a constant. Politicians rarely admit a mistake. Few convincingly confess they were wrong. And that's because our society condemns something we should praise: the changing of minds. Oprah Winfrey asked Malcolm Gladwell this intriguing question: what is a piece of wisdom you wish the leaders of the world would use in their decision making? Gladwell didn't hesitate. He said, it's okay to be wrong. It's fine. Just say, I blew it. Let's try to find a better way. Wouldn't that be refreshing? Wouldn't that be a better way to govern? Intellectual humility should be encouraged publicly so we can learn from mistakes and find better solutions. We have to grant each other amnesty from our previous beliefs. Rather than leaping to accusations of inconsistency and hypocrisy, let's nurture reconsideration. Last month, Luke Combs, a country singer, was criticized for speaking out about racism after he was found having used a Confederate flag in one of his concerts in 2015. And he responded this way. He said, as I've grown in my time as an artist and as the world has changed drastically in the last 5 to 7 years, I am now aware how painful that image can be, the flag, Confederate flag. I would never want to be associated with something that brings so much hurt to someone else. Now, is this just Combs' self-serving strategy to increase record sales, or a genuine evolution towards ethical thinking? I don't know. But I do know that more often than we should admit our own mistakes and learn to do better. Each of us has to decide how often we punish the inconsistency of others and how often we reward growth. And we have to do that inside ourselves as well. We should offer amnesty to ourselves from our past beliefs. I mean, after all, we so often get caught in a box we construct for ourselves, an old framework that resists new perspectives. We ignore new evidence, we defend our beliefs and identity as static rather than allowing ourselves to grow. And as a result, we don't want to evolve and learn better. In my effort to embrace intellectual humility, which I'm not always successful at, I found some useful advice in Warren Burger's book, The Book of Beautiful Questions. It's not the same Warren Burger that was on the Supreme Court, I don't believe. Burger suggests that we get into the habit of asking ourselves 4 questions to test our intellectual humility. Do I think more like a soldier or a scout? Would I rather be right or would I rather understand? Do I solicit and seek out opposing views? Do I enjoy the pleasant surprise of finding out that I am mistaken? Here's how I respond to those 4 questions. Do I think more like a soldier or a scout? I hope I think less like a soldier who just defends territory and more like a scout who explores new territory. I want to learn. Would I rather be right or would I rather understand? As much fun as it is to be right, as much as my ego yearns for affirmation, I want to understand more than I want to be right because I want to learn. Do I seek out opposing views? I'll admit, maybe this is where I most fall short, especially recently. I mean, after 4 years of an administration broadcasting views directly opposite mine that seem all like lies, I'm worn down and exhausted. I don't wake up every morning thinking I want to have coffee and conversation with a QAnon believer. But when in dialogue with people holding views opposite mine, I hope I can less often say, I disagree, and more often say, tell me more. I want to learn. Finally, do I enjoy the pleasant surprise of finding out that I'm mistaken? Not often enough. Too often I allow the social stigma surrounding mistakes to constrict my education. I hope to do better because I want to learn. Do you? Do all of us? So what about that metaphor I offered at the beginning of my talk? If we're sailing on a ship between the dangerous vast ocean and the more dangerous rocky shore, where is the greater danger? Doubt or certainty? Well, those who doubt climate change and pandemic protections are certainly dangerous, but those who are most certain about those doubts are even more dangerous because certainty can close off conversation, and this has crippled our civic discourse. Adam Waite suggests, quote, at a time where political polarization, income inequality, and urban-rural separation have deeply fractured us over social and economic issues, recognizing our only modest understanding of these issues is a first step to bridging these divides. Doubt in and of itself rarely causes war and crimes against humanity. Doubt can allow dialogue. It offers more opportunity for reconsideration, for the changing of minds. It'll take conversation and education and time and patience. And maybe the devil's in the details. Maybe it's just about what you doubt and what you hold as certain. Perhaps. But to me, for me in my life, maybe for the humanist groups we all join, maybe for free thinkers, a bit more intellectual humility might do us some good. Thanks for listening. Now we'll just go to sort of Q&A, comments, whatever you want. Maybe not focusing so much on convincing others that we are right, but sharing your thoughts. Love to hear them.
Thank you. Thank you. I really love the talk. I asked Drew in the chat, and he said that Hugh would be able to share references, and I'm really looking forward to that. I wanted to ask you one thing, to repeat that, if you can, repeat that wonderful quote from William James. It was so pithy and aphoristic about the gist was you find you stop believing in God and then worship him or whatever. That was so great. And then the other thing, the name slips my mind right now, but I love him too. That the American free thinker that you read,
Robert Ingersoll.
Robert Ingersoll. I have his books and I've actually read them. They're tough going. But thank you so much for reading it. As you read it, it suddenly dawned on me why I have trouble with him, as he talked about all the terrible things that his new mental freedom was allowing him to lay down. I don't have to read these dusty old books anymore, or even think about them. What came to my mind was, in a very few cases, he might be throwing a baby out with that dirty bath water, and there might be some useful things to pay attention to. And it clicked for me that has been my problem with him, that the just say no tone of it. But so thank you for your talk. I really appreciated it.
Yeah. I mean, Ingersoll was the leading public intellectual of his time as far as getting people into a hall and getting them whipped up with excitement. So a lot of his writing was about rallying folks for whom religion was very having caused a lot of trauma in their lives. So it was a real sort of embrace of that new freedom. But yes, anybody who wants, best for me is to simply send anybody who wants a copy of the book, and the book, copy of my talk, and you can search for all the references in there. I usually include links to most of the people that I quote, and you can follow up with an email to me if you'd like. So, who's next?
Dan Hoffman is raising his.
Dan, hi Dan.
Hello. There's a really heavy finger on the scale of beliefs. And I think that we who say that we are bound by science in our thinking really need to pay attention better to the role of evolution in our beliefs. Yeah, we talk about the Skinnerian things and, the adaptive benefits, but tribalism confers a genetic advantage on the people who join a tribe. If you're not a part of a tribe, the members of other tribes will just destroy you. And that's just a fact. It's been that way forever in human history. We can look at it. Jane Goodall identified that in primates. It's the way it is. So we tell ourselves that coincidentally, we have independently arrived at this huge Nicene creed of beliefs of our tribe, and check the dozens of beliefs as, oh yes, these are true, and the corresponding beliefs in the other tribe are false, and they're horrible people for holding those beliefs, every particular one, and we are good people for all the beliefs, every particular one. So I just haven't seen the trend going in a good direction on this. If anything, I see us as becoming more tribal and more dogmatic and not less. And it's really frustrating. And I just wanted to put that out there and say that that tribal finger on the scale of our beliefs is really heavy, and we ignore it at our peril.
Thank you, Dan. Excellent points. That's a um, uh, consistent point you've been making for a little while, and I also want to, add this tweak to it. Yeah, the power of tribalism. I've written a couple of times about it in the newsletter recently, so I'm trying to lean into that a little bit more and be more self-aware of my own tribalism. Like when I walked around the neighborhood in the fall and my mayoral candidate in Tacoma Park signs gave me senses of camaraderie, and I wanted to go up to the doors of those people and have a beer on their porch. And I saw the opposing mayor's candidate and I had this visceral reaction, this tribal reaction. It's bizarre. So it is powerful. I appreciate you bringing it up. I see Ken has his hand raised in the app.
Um, I'm very interested in religion and the Bible without being much of a believer at all, none. But I think that when you read, as soon as you read the Bible, you come up with contradictions and ambiguity. You read the first 4 pages or so of Genesis, and you get two creation stories which do not mathematically go together. They're similar, but they're not the same. And as you read the rest of the Bible, the same kinds of things happen. I think that the more that zealotry has really taken over, not actually among people like the Ethical Society. I think it's on the other side. So I do point the finger more at the other side for that. I think that there's some reaction of tribalism on our part, but I think it's really mostly there. I think that there's a lot of groupthink and a lot of pastors who won't be wrong because that would lose their flock, and who propose a particular view of the scriptures and won't look at any other. And there's not enough reading of the Bible itself. I think that a lot of the zealotry, which is the opposite of what you were talking about with skepticism, would dissipate if people actually looked at the source material. Because I think everybody, no matter how much you believe in the God or the Bible, when it comes down to making a decision, actually individual moral little decisions, I think we all do it in pretty much the same way.
Thanks, Ken. Yeah, and I think, Ken, you know more about the Bible than I do, and your critique of Christianity is informed by a deeper knowledge. And so I sort of I agree with you, but I also feel like all sides need to embrace that doubt and understand our tribalism better. So excellent points. I see Robert and Faith with their hand up in the app. I may be missing waved hands. Yeah, Robert and Faith, go ahead. And then Betsy after that.
Okay, I'm jumping in here as a person who is still a member of a Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
I call myself a follower of Jesus. I cannot say the creeds. But what I find there is that, the love God, and I'm still dealing with that in my own head, just what that is. And love your neighbor as yourself. And that is what is fed in me just about every Sunday. I am Zooming my church service before I come in here. And I see a lot of us on a similar walk. I think the irony here is that you could probably ask every person in the congregation what their perception of God is or how they feel about creeds. I've And I told our new pastor that I can't say the creeds. We've yet to be able to meet to discuss that. But the issue for me is how we choose to live and decisions we're going to make. And my faith feeds that very much. I can certainly hear um, there's a lot of, and the other thing is one of the best sermons I ever heard was one preached by a person who also happens to be a personal friend, who said that doubt was a great thing. That when you doubt, it means that you are seeking to grow. You're questioning different things and you haven't accepted the status quo. And what are those things that you're thinking about? And your faith, whatever it is or however it takes form, is active and growing. So there is that perspective, and people can find very open pastors and people of faith. So my only perspective here is that there's probably as many different perceptions of what faith is or what people believe in a congregation that there may be in an ethical society congregation. And those differences of opinion and insight, I think, lead to growth. So I guess what I'm looking for is there's a way to coexist. There's been a lot of damage done in the name of religion,
Right.
and I'd be the first one to agree with that. But I also know that I'm in a community of people that are really trying to be the best people that they can be, and that's inspired by what I hear literally every Sunday.
Thanks, Faith, and thanks for stepping forward and offering that to a group that has a fair amount of skeptics and free thinkers in it. And your point is why I joined ethical culture, because it's more important in my mind. Ethical culture is about how we treat each other more than the reasons why we treat each other one way or another. So I think I think free thinkers and humanists need to do a better job of allowing the non-rational a place in our lives. I don't mean the irrational. I mean the non-rational. I don't think everything is explained by evidence and reason. I think love and beauty and ethics are informed by things that can't necessarily be captured in a rational framework. And I think that's the area that I'm working on to try to understand. I mean, goodness, if the Dalai Lama can, he understands astrophysics and is a man who has a metaphysics that would differ from mine. So there's lots of room for that. I appreciate that. Thank you. I think we had somebody waiting. Betsy?
Okay, just an addendum to actually Martha's remarks in the ethical action report. I just want to point out that Jenny Fells, who was very instrumental in making the ethical society thrive way back when, was one of the actions she was involved with was with the shirtwaist workers strike, and she followed up in Philadelphia. So I just wanted to add that. And I want to go back to the being wrong part of your talk, and that kind of triggered our educational system really doesn't really support that very well. It's like, you get the right answer, you get an A, you get the wrong answer, you get docked for it. So it's not real encouraging for risk taking, and particularly as in recent years where I guess grades are really more important than they might have been when I was in school. But I just recall a couple of things. I got rewarded a couple of times for being wrong. And in a way, in a philosophy class where I couldn't remember the readings I was supposed to be writing about, but I just made up an answer, and he thought I was thinking philosophically, so I got an A. And so the other was in a creative writing class where I I write beyond my skills, and it was recognized and praised by the professor that I had. My skills will catch up, and I will, at some point I will, etc. So those two things. I think that, well, that's probably enough. So.
Thanks, Betsy. Excellent points. Appreciate that. It's being a minister's daughter gave you another. I'm going sort of back to some of the earlier things, but I know that that has when you know somebody who is of faith and when you're close to them, I think it gives you a different perspective on religion, and maybe at another time we can talk more about that and your experience with your dad. So, thanks. Other points of question? Other points or questions?
Doris has her hand.
Doris Dabrowski.
Okay. Thank you for the talk. It raises such important points. And I think one of the most difficult acknowledgements that anyone can make is to admit that I don't know, or not even getting to the point of admitting I'm wrong, but I don't know something, but I will find out is often the best way to address a period of ignorance. And all too often, and I don't say ignorance pejoratively there, and all too often we're just saddled with with the ill consequences of blaming other people if it turns out that we are wrong, or just perpetuating some kind of fallacy when we really don't know and we guess.
Yeah.
Rather than ascertain what is a true set of facts.
Yeah, I've been guilty of that. I'll go to Justy, but certainly our ability to hit click on Facebook allows us to pass along stuff that's based on rubbish. So, and I've had to backtrack a couple of times. We've got to learn to do that more. Justy.
I'd like to get your.
Sorry, you went mute. You must have re-hit the mute. So unmute again, Justy.
Okay.
Good.
I'd like to get your opinion on the difference between atheism and agnosticism. Some people think it's a continuum. I think it's a scale of two different things. And I would use the example, my parents tried to raise me Roman Catholic, but the experiment failed. So I ended up, being a secular humanist. My mother remained a Roman Catholic, but I would call her an agnostic Catholic, and I would call myself an agnostic atheist. And we got along very well. And what my mom said, she said that she didn't know that there was a God, but she liked to believe that there was. So in other words, she was a believer, she was a theist, but she was agnostic in that she wasn't sure that there was a God. And I might call myself an atheist, but I would call myself an agnostic atheist because I'm not sure that there's not a God.
Right.
She's going more by faith and saying she wants to believe there is. I'm going more by what I think is logic and saying there's more likely that there's not. But we got along really well. We were best friends, although we disagreed on this. And I think that it might have been the point that I wasn't sure there wasn't, and she wasn't sure there was, that, we got together on what we knew was
Right.
that we loved each other. We were family.
Amen. That's a mini sermon there, Justy.
Oh.
Thank you. No, it's true. It's true. I mean,
what is your view on that? Because some people think that, agnosticism, like they're the same scale, but not two different ones.
No, I'm okay with those use of words because they mean different things to different people. I mean, my wife, my wife describes herself as an atheist who positively denies the existence of God, and I'm an atheist who tends to just not want to spend a lot of time trying to prove or disprove that. So there are shadings on that, and it's not as important as the love we have in our heart for our friends and family and the entire sentient life that is on this biosphere. To me, it is a, an exponentially smaller thing. Now, clearly, ideas and beliefs can cause great suffering and pain. So I do not want to minimize the connection between the two. But so often we get caught up in the beliefs that are things we can learn to live with that might differ from others. So I'm all for sliding scales and shades of gray. That's kind of the way life is.